Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of just pure precision.
Right, it feels like engineering almost.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points at the screen and says, there it is. That's the problem.
It's comforting, honestly, because it's so visible.
Yes.
I mean, we have this profound psychological bias toward things that can just be categorized and measured.
Put into a neat little box.
Exactly, a neat binary of like broken or not broken.
But the moment you step out of that physical realm and into the world of human identity or, our deeply held beliefs.
Oh, the X-ray machine is utterly useless there.
Completely useless. We are suddenly navigating this landscape that is just incredibly murky. So the question is, how much of the world you see every day and how much of your own identity is actually real?
Right.
And how much of it is just a script written by someone else's fear?
Which is honestly the defining question of our modern era.
And it's a question that affects every single person listening to this right now. You wake up, you check your phone, you step out into your neighborhood.
Like we all do every morning.
Right. And you operate under this incredibly complex architecture of assumptions. Assumptions about who you are, who your neighbors are, what the whole world is doing.
But if we actually trace the blueprints of those assumptions, we often find they were drafted by forces we aren't even aware of.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. So to explore that architecture today, we are doing a deep dive using this incredibly unvarnished conversation from a Dutch YouTube show.
It's called Heat Hang Lasers, right?
Yeah, which translates to Hot Topics. And it's hosted by Philip Van Hal, and he's sitting down with Sana Orki.
And she is just a fascinating subject for this.
Oh, totally. She's a media personality and a podcaster who has lived this genuinely fascinating life, basically straddling the divide between mainstream and alternative media.
The conversation they have, it serves as this remarkable case study. I mean, it touches on identity, on modern relationships, and the invisible mechanics of media manipulation.
But before we really begin dissecting all of this, we need to establish some ground rules for our journey today.
Yeah, a very important disclaimer here.
Right. We need to be crystal clear with you, the listener. This source material wades into some highly charged political, cultural, and gender-related waters.
Yeah, to be charged.
Yeah, it touches on modern culture wars, complex immigration debates, shifting gender dynamics. So we are purely here as your guides to unpack the ideas presented in this fascinating conversation.
Exactly. We aren't taking sides here.
Nope. We aren't endorsing any political or cultural viewpoints, and we are absolutely not judging the left or the right. Our goal is solely to help you understand the diverse perspectives that are shared in the source material.
Right. We're looking at the mechanics of the arguments, not, voting on them.
Well said. We're essentially operating as sociologists and psychologists today.
Yeah, just observing the machinery of human behavior. And to observe that machinery clearly, we really need to look at the lens through which Sana Orki views the world.
Which is super unique.
It is. She occupies a highly unique sociological position. She lives between the Netherlands and Morocco.
Great.
So she is constantly navigating this life that attempts to harmonize her Islamic roots with her reality as a highly independent modern woman.
And she actually describes herself in the source material using this great Dutch phrase. She calls herself a bittenbensje and a binnenbensje.
Which means essentially she is simultaneously a misfit or an outsider and an insider.
Right. And because she floats between these two deeply contrasting worlds, she has access to this kind of cultural mirror that, frankly, most people simply never get to look into.
And the reflections in that mirror provide some of the absolute most illuminating sociological insights in the entire conversation.
I couldn't agree more.
Like, she spends a significant amount of time in Marrakech, Morocco. But to understand the gravity of her observation there, we have to establish the context of her other home, which is the Netherlands.
Right. We have to set the stage.
Yeah. Across much of Western Europe right now, there is a highly prominent and often tense political debate regarding immigration.
Right. Specifically focusing on immigrants from Moroccan or Islamic backgrounds.
Exactly. And the rhetoric you hear in the European debates usually revolves around integration.
You hear the same complaints over and over, right? That immigrants isolate themselves, that they refuse to adapt to the local culture.
Yeah, that they're buying up neighborhoods, and that the native European culture is just slowly being erased by these closed-off communities.
So that is the established script in the West. But then shift the geography. Sane is in Marrakech.
Right.
She is sitting with the local Moroccan population, and she begins listening to them complain about a sudden influx of immigrants.
But here's the twist. They aren't talking about refugees.
No, they are complaining about Dutch expats who have moved to Morocco.
And what are the local Moroccans saying about these Dutch expats? This is the crazy part.
They are using the exact same talking points that the Dutch used back in the Netherlands.
It's uncanny.
It really is. The Moroccans are literally saying, these Dutch people are coming here, they're buying up our real estate, they don't bother to learn Arabic or the local dialects.
Right. They are starting their own separate schools for their kids. They even have their own European supermarkets now.
Our Moroccan culture is disappearing. I mean, wow.
If we isolate that phenomena and just examine the psychology beneath it, it completely strips away the highly specific, hyper-politicized context of the European immigration debate.
Yeah, it really does.
It reveals that what we are looking at isn't inherently a Dutch political trait or, a Moroccan cultural trait. It is a foundational, universal human anxiety.
The biological fear of losing the familiar.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack the biology of that. Why is the familiar so vital to us?
Well, human neurology is fundamentally wired for pattern recognition and predictability. Predictability basically equals safety.
Right, because for thousands of years of human evolution, if your environment suddenly changed,
Yeah, if new people arrived, if the landscape was altered, if the local language shifted, it usually meant a threat to your resources or your literal survival.
that makes total sense.
So when the environment around us changes rapidly today, our amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, it still perceives that sudden shift as a potential danger.
Regardless of the actual political context.
Precisely.
So the Moroccans in Marrakech and the Dutch in Amsterdam are essentially experiencing the exact same neurological threat response, just triggered by different actors.
Yeah, same hardware, different software.
But Philip, the host of the show, he pushes back on this framing a bit, and I think his perspective is really vital here.
He does. He argues for the intrinsic value of distinct cultures.
Right, he expresses this profound sense of grief he feels when he travels globally now. He finds that cities are becoming hyper-globalized.
Just indistinguishable from one another.
Yeah.
Philip is articulating a very real modern phenomenon, which sociologists often call cultural homogenization.
Right.
And he clarifies that his grief isn't rooted in extreme nationalism or anything like that. It's rooted in an aesthetic and historical desire for recognizable identity in our shared human spaces.
He talks about wanting to travel to Kenya or Uzbekistan and feeling that the culture is still truly distinct.
Untouched by that globalized franchise blender that makes every international city look like a generic airport terminal.
A generic airport terminal, that's such a good way to put it. And Sanaa deeply understands that feeling. She provides a really beautiful, tangible example from her own life in Marrakech.
Oh, the music example.
Yes, so she's sitting in a restaurant and she hears Nawa music playing. For those listening who are unfamiliar, Nawa is a deeply traditional, spiritual, rhythmic music native to Morocco.
Right, it's very raw, it's acoustic, it involves specific string instruments and these really heavy bass rhythms.
But in this particular restaurant, the traditional Nawa is being remixed with Western electronic house music.
And she describes her internal psychological tug-of-war so honestly here. Her first instinct is entirely protective.
Right, she feels an urge to preserve the authenticity.
Yeah, she thinks, why do we have to mix these sacred traditional sounds with a synthetic house beat? She feels that biological urge to guard the cultural perimeter.
But then, almost simultaneously, her physiological response kicks in.
Exactly, and she realizes, actually, this has an incredible groove to it.
It's the battle between preservation and evolution happening right there at her dinner table.
It really is. And Sane uses that moment to counter Philip's point. She argues that culture is never actually static. It has never been frozen in time.
The idea of a quote-unquote pure culture is just a historical illusion.
Right. Trying to put a glass dome over a culture and say this is what it is forever is ultimately just an expression of our fear of losing control over our environment.
Wow. So the deeper sociological realization here is that whenever we cling desperately to a cultural label, we are rarely defending the culture itself.
No, we are defending our own sense of safety.
We are seeking the comfort of a known category.
And Sinai astutely points out that the moment we slap a rigid label on something or someone, we stop seeing the actual breathing, evolving, human being in front of us.
We only see the category.
Right, which totally flattens reality.
You know, I was thinking about this, and it reminds me of trying to keep a river in a bucket.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, because the entire fundamental nature of a river is to flow. It carves new paths, it picks up sediment from one region and deposits it in another, it merges with other streams.
It could constantly move it.
Exactly. But the moment you scoop it up and trap it in a bucket, it stops being a river. It just becomes stagnant water.
Yeah, you've preserved it, sure.
You can point to the bucket and say, look, I saved the river, but
Yeah.
you've actually killed the essence of what made it alive in the first place.
That captures the tension perfectly. A living culture is a river. It's not a bucket of preserved water.
Okay, let's unpack this because I have to push back here. As much as I love the romanticism of the river analogy, dropping all labels sounds incredibly disorienting.
Oh, terrifying.
Right. If we don't have these cultural buckets, if we don't have these categories of I am Dutch or I am Moroccan or I belong to this specific religion, doesn't that leave us completely unanchored?
It does feel that way.
How do you or anyone listening navigate the world without a map of who you are?
That is the pivotal, terrifying question. And the fear of facing that exact disorientation is what keeps most people gripping their buckets until their knuckles turn white.
I mean, I would too.
Right. When you realize your cultural bucket might be an illusion, the immediate consequence is a profound sense of psychological vertigo.
Who are you without the bucket?
Exactly. And this leads directly into the next phase of Sinai's story, where she reached a point where she had to drop her anchor, and the psychological fallout was just immense.
This brings us to the existential crisis. And I think anyone listening who has ever hit a wall in their late 20s or 30s is going to resonate with this deeply.
Oh, absolutely.
So Sinai is 25 years old. On paper, by every metric society uses to measure success, she is winning.
She has all the ingredients for happiness.
Yeah, she has a highly visible job in media, wonderful friends, she travels the world. She is reading the script perfectly.
But the dissonance begins when the external script no longer matches the internal reality.
Right.
She describes feeling this absolute hollow emptiness. She is looking at her lives, looking at the decades stretching out ahead of her, and this terrifying, quiet thought creeps in.
Is this it? Is this all there is to existence?
It's the quintessential quarter-life crisis, but for her, it went much deeper than just wondering if she should change careers.
It struck at the very bedrock of her identity.
Yeah. She realized she needed to start investigating her own beliefs, to search for an actual resonant meaning. But she was completely paralyzed by fear.
And why was that? Because investigating her beliefs meant she might lose her identity as a Muslim.
Which perfectly illustrates the immense gravitational pull of labels. Her sense of self was so deeply intertwined with that specific religious, cultural, and familial framework.
That to even question the framework felt like a form of psychological self-annihilation.
It is a form of ego death. She had to ask herself, if I let go of this label, if I am no longer the specific thing my family expects me to be, do I even exist?
That is heavy. She admits it took her 6 full months just to build up the courage to begin the search.
6 months just to accept a single, terrifying premise.
That she would follow her investigation wherever it led, even if it meant discovering that God didn't exist.
She had to be willing to lose everything she thought she knew in order to find out what was actually true.
They touch upon a profound epistemological distinction in the source material to explain this, right? The difference between believing and knowing.
Yes, and Sinai makes a very compelling philosophical argument here. She suggests that you only believe in something when you don't actually know it, through direct personal experience.
Right.
Belief requires a leap of faith precisely because empirical, embodied knowledge is absent.
She realized she had a massive amount of intellectual knowledge. Like, she had read the texts, she knew the traditions, she had inherited the theology from her community.
But she hadn't embodied it.
Exactly. It was borrowed knowledge. It was like memorizing a map of Paris without ever having walked the streets.
That's a great way to look at it. To contextualize this shift, Philip introduces a brilliant framework regarding the concentric circles of identity.
Oh, I loved this part.
Yeah, so imagine 3 circles nested inside one another like a target. The outermost circle, which is the weakest and most fragile form of identity, is identity derived from having.
Like, I am what I own, I'm the car I drive, I'm the status my job title provides.
Right. And it's incredibly precarious. If the market crashes and you lose the job or the house, your entire identity evaporates overnight.
Poof.
Gone.
Exactly. So moving inward, the middle circle is identity derived from doing. I am my actions, I am my achievements, I am my role as a provider or a caretaker.
Which is stronger than having, obviously, because it relies on your own agency.
True, but it is still fundamentally reliant on external output. If you get injured and can no longer perform your job or your role, who are you?
Right.
So the innermost circle, the core anchor, is identity derived from being. It is a state of existence independent of possessions, actions, or societal roles.
And Sinai was attempting this monumental shift from the outer circles to that innermost circle.
And Philip brings up the 19th century Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard to describe this transition.
Specifically, his concept of the leap into the unknown.
Right. Kierkegaard's leap of faith is central to existentialism. It is the ultimate surrender to uncertainty.
Acknowledging that intellect and rationality can only take you so far.
Yeah, they can take you to the very edge of the cliff. They can explain the physics of falling. But eventually, if you want to find your true center, you cannot think your way down. You just have to jump into the dark without knowing if there is solid ground beneath you.
To make that leap, Sinai had to radically change her methodology. She realized she couldn't intellectualize her way out of the emptiness.
More bucks weren't the answer.
No. So she turned to somatic learning. She immersed herself in yoga, deep breath work, and meditation.
But for the listener who might hear breath work and just think of like casual stretching or relaxing, we really need to explain the mechanics of this.
It's much deeper than that.
Why does somatic learning bypass our mental blocks so effectively?
Well, somatic literally means of the body. It is the practice of accessing the nervous system directly, completely bypassing the analytical mind.
Okay.
When you run a text, your brain's cognitive dissonance is highly active. Your mind can twist words, debate them, rationalize away uncomfortable truths just to protect your existing worldview.
The brain is a very good lawyer.
Exactly. But your nervous system doesn't debate. When you engage in intense somatic practices, you are fundamentally altering your physiological state.
Like releasing stored tension.
Yes. The physical and emotional sensations, the sudden release of stored trauma, the profound sense of physical grounding, they are undeniable. It is an internal truth that isn't open to external interpretation.
You aren't believing it, you are feeling it, you know it.
Yes.
It's like navigating your life using a GPS system programmed by someone else. You are driving, following the voice, but you constantly feel lost.
Right.
And changing your beliefs intellectually is just typing a new address into the same flawed GPS.
Still the same bad machine.
Exactly. Somatic learning is turning the machine off entirely, rolling down the window, and feeling the temperature of the air and the direction of the wind to find your way.
I love that.
But let me challenge this for a second. Turning off the GPS is terrifying. You might end up completely lost in the woods.
You might.
So is the comfort of a borrowed belief system, even if it feels a bit empty, really worse than the terror of wandering in the dark trying to find your own truth?
Well, for a significant portion of the population, the borrowed GPS is perfectly fine. It provides structure, community, safety.
Ignorance is bliss, in a way.
Kind of. But for someone experiencing the profound, hollow emptiness I described, the GPS becomes unbearable because you realize it is just driving you in circles.
Right.
The terror of the unknown woods eventually becomes preferable to the slow, suffocating death of living an entirely inauthentic life.
Wow. And once you strip away those societal labels and rebuild your identity from the ground up, the very next thing that shatters is how you relate to other human beings.
It has to.
Right. If you change the foundation of who you are, the house of your relationships has to be rebuilt.
And this pivots us into one of the most complex, layered, and frankly controversial parts of the source material.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The deep dive into modern gender dynamics.
It is a highly charged topic in the source, and to analyze it properly, we really must maintain our sociological lens here.
Purely observing.
Right. Both Philip and Sinai begin with a shared foundational premise, which is rooted in Jungian psychology, that masculine and feminine energies exist within everyone, regardless of biological sex.
Right, we all contain a spectrum of assertiveness and receptivity, logic and intuition.
But from that shared starting point, they highlight severe friction in how these energies are manifesting in modern society.
Yeah, Philip brings up what he terms the silent crisis of men.
He points to stark sociological data. The significantly higher rates of suicide, the overwhelming majority of the homeless population being male, the higher rates of severe substance abuse.
And Philip's sociological observation is that the mainstream cultural narrative over the last few decades has shifted in a way that leaves many men feeling deeply alienated.
Right. His view is that while historical feminism was obviously necessary to fight for legal, economic, and professional equality,
Of course.
a more recent, extreme iteration has taken hold in the cultural zeitgeist that tends to pathologize authentic masculinity.
He feels the male perspective is constantly framed through the lens of the perpetrator.
Exactly, leaving men feeling underrepresented, preemptively attacked, and just profoundly isolated.
He argues that society constantly broadcasts the message that traditional masculinity is toxic, but then offers zero constructive guidance on what positive masculinity should actually look like.
It's a void.
Yeah, and on the flip side of this dynamic, we have the modern female experience, which Sinai speaks to from her personal experience.
We now have generations of highly educated, financially independent women who are thriving professionally.
But this massive economic shift has created a fascinating paradox in modern dating.
Oh, it is one of the most studied paradoxes in modern sociology right now.
Really?
Yes. Despite achieving total financial independence, many highly successful women still possess a deeply ingrained desire for a male partner who earns more or holds a higher social status.
And Sinai notes that the rationale often given is that these women who spend all day operating in highly competitive masculine energy corporate environments want to come home and just relax,
Right. They want the psychological safety of knowing they could be provided for.
allowing them to drop into their feminine energy even if they don't strictly need the man's money to survive.
But mathematically, that creates a huge bottleneck.
Oh, totally. If women are outpacing men in higher education and occupying more high-earning brackets, the pool of men who meet that traditional criteria of being the higher status provider is shrinking rapidly.
Very rapidly. And this demographic reality leads to a massive increase in loneliness and frustration among successful single women.
They want a traditional provider dynamic, but they themselves have outgrown the traditional economic constraints.
And to understand why this clash is so painful, we really have to look at the history of marriage, which Philip insightfully contextualizes here.
This blew my mind.
We suffer from a modern delusion that marriage has always been about romantic love, finding your soulmate, and emotional completion.
Right, the Disney version.
But sociologically speaking, the emotion-driven, purely romantic marriage is a very recent invention. It really only solidified the last 200 years following the Industrial Revolution.
Wait, only 200 years? That completely reframes the conversation.
I know. Prior to the 18th century, for the vast majority of human agricultural history, marriage was primarily an economic and survival institution.
Wow.
It was a pragmatic arrangement designed to secure land, consolidate meager resources, ensure physical safety, and build strategic familial alliances.
You didn't marry for butterflies in your stomach.
No, you married so you wouldn't freeze or starve during the winter. It was an economic partnership.
So, we have taken an institution designed for economic survival, stripped away the economic necessity because both genders can now earn their own living,
Right.
and replaced it entirely with the crushing expectation of perpetual romantic and emotional fulfillment.
Yes.
It's like taking a tractor designed to plow fields and suddenly expecting it to win a Formula One race. No wonder the system is buckling under the pressure.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. The underlying architecture of the institution just hasn't caught up to the modern psychological demands.
So what's the fix?
Well, Sinai offers a vision to replace this outdated model. The traditional agrarian model was built on strict dependency. The man provides external resources, the woman provides internal domestic care.
Right.
But, as Sinai points out, that creates a catastrophic vulnerability in the modern world. If you are leaning entirely on each other in specialized roles, and one partner falls due to illness, death, or divorce, the other partner completely collapses.
Because they have no capacity to function in the other realm.
Exactly.
You see this when a woman in her 50s who has never managed finances suddenly has to navigate the economy alone, or a man who has never engaged emotionally with his children is suddenly thrust into being a single father.
The dependency creates extreme fragility.
Therefore, Sinai advocates for a dynamic of mutual independence. She has this powerful quote in the source material regarding what she seeks in a partner.
What did she say?
She said, "I don't want you to pay for everything, but I want you to help me be independent."
Okay, let's pause on that. Help me be independent. It sounds like an oxymoron at first glance.
Right. If you are helping me, I'm not independent.
But what she's getting at is that a modern partnership shouldn't be about disabling each other to make yourselves necessary. It should be about cross-training.
Yeah, she is saying, if you want to make me feel genuinely safe, don't just build a wall around me. Teach me how to build my own wall.
It is the subtle difference between leaning on someone and being carried by them. In a healthy dynamic, you want to be able to lean to share the emotional weight of life.
For sure.
But if the other person steps away, you should stumble, perhaps, but you shouldn't fall flat on your face. You possess the internal infrastructure to stand back up.
It's like the traditional gender roles are a three-legged race.
Oh, that's good.
You tie one of your legs to your partner's leg.
Yeah.
You are forced to move together. You have to coordinate every single step. And from the outside, it looks like perfect teamwork.
Right.
But the reality is, if one of you trips, the rope ensures that both of you are going to smash into the ground.
It's guaranteed.
Yeah. So Sana is suggesting we untie the rope. Let's run side by side. We can hold hands, we can pace each other, we can offer a shoulder if the other gets tired, but we each need to be running on our own two distinct, capable feet.
But the transition from the three-legged race to running side by side is incredibly messy.
Oh, I'm sure.
And this brings us to one of Philip's most poignant and challenging observations about male vulnerability.
Let's hear it.
Currently, the overarching societal message directed at men is a massive demand for emotional openness. Men are told to drop the stoic mask, to cry, to express their fears, to be entirely vulnerable.
The message is everywhere, right? Like toxic masculinity is ruining your life. Just show your feelings and you will be accepted.
But Philip points out a harsh, conflicting reality that many men experience in the dating market. When they actually do follow this advice, when they drop the mask and show profound weakness, fear, or insecurity,
What happened?
their female partners often experience a sudden, involuntary loss of romantic attraction. Yeah, the woman feels a sudden loss of safety because her deeply embedded biological and cultural conditioning still expects the man to be the unshakable rock in times of crisis.
I have to push back here because this sounds like a potentially dangerous generalization.
It's a fair concern.
Are we saying women only claim they want vulnerable men but biologically reject it? What is the actual mechanism there, or is this just a narrative men tell themselves to justify remaining closed off?
It is a vital pushback. And the sociological mechanism at play here is cognitive dissonance between our stated progressive ideals and our evolutionary hardware.
Okay, unpack that.
The argument isn't that women are lying, it's that the human nervous system is complex. A woman's prefrontal cortex, her modern logical brain, genuinely desires emotional intimacy and a partner who can communicate fears.
Right.
But her amygdala, shaped by thousands of years of evolutionary pressure, where a male's physical and emotional stoicism was directly linked to the family's survival, can panic when that protector figure suddenly appears fragile.
I see.
It perfectly highlights the lag in our evolution. We are trying to run a highly progressive 21st century software update on neurological hardware that is thousands of years old. The friction isn't malice, it's biological lag.
That makes total sense. It's a brutal double bind for everyone involved. If we remove the financial necessity from relationships and our biological wires are crossing when we try to connect emotionally, what actually keeps two people together when things get difficult?
That is the existential challenge of modern love. If dependency no longer binds us, the answer has to be a highly conscious daily choice to evolve together.
Wow.
But here is a critical pivot in our understanding of these sources. These incredibly complex cultural tensions, the anxiety over migration, the crisis of losing our labels, the friction and confusion between men and women, they don't just exist in a vacuum.
They are not just naturally occurring weather patterns.
Oh no, they are being actively, meticulously farmed.
They are actively manipulated, magnified, and monetized by the media architecture we consume daily. Which brings us to the core, arguably the most impactful concept discussed in the source material, angst porno, or fear porn.
Let's get deep into the mechanics of this, because Sunny's insider perspective is chilling.
It really is. She didn't just observe this from the outside. She spent 13 years building a highly successful career within mainstream media. She knows how the sausage is made.
And she ultimately walked away from it all.
Why? Because she realized from the inside that the media doesn't just report the news, it actively programs the nervous systems of its viewers.
Right.
And the primary coding languages it uses to write that program are guilt, shame, and above all, fear.
To understand the power of fear porn, we have to look at the neuroscience of attention. The media industry operates on an attention economy.
We've all heard that phrase.
Right, but think about it biologically. Human neurology is fundamentally wired with a negativity bias. From an evolutionary standpoint, paying attention to a rustling bush that might be a tiger was far more crucial for survival than paying attention to a beautiful sunset.
The sunset won't eat you.
Exactly. And the media exploits this biological vulnerability.
Hmm.
If a news program tells you everything is generally fine, your amygdala relaxes and you change the channel.
You tune out.
But if it tells you an invisible, insidious enemy is coming to destroy your specific way of life, your HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal system, floods your body with cortisol.
You enter survival mode.
And you stay glued to the screen to monitor the threat.
Sinai realized she was participating in a massive industrialized system designed to keep the population in a constant state of low-grade, cortisol-soaked panic.
It's exhausting.
It is. So feeling stifled by the mainstream narrative, especially during the COVID pandemic, she pivots. She moves over to alternative media.
She starts working for a platform called Black Box.
Right.
Yeah.
And her motivation was noble. She wanted to provide the other side of the story, to give people the full, unvarnished picture so they can make up their own minds free from mainstream manipulation.
And this is where she encounters an incredibly painful, paradigm-shifting realization.
The big plot twist.
Yeah. After spending a couple of years deep in the trenches of alternative media, reporting on global agendas, central banking policies, and hidden power structures,
She realizes that the alternative media ecosystem utilizes the exact same psychological mechanisms as the mainstream media.
it is the exact same playbook. They just swap out the vocabulary and the boogeymen.
Instead of making you terrified of a virus or immigrants or climate change, the alternative media makes you terrified of Agenda 2030 or the global elite or the imminent collapse of the fiat currency system.
The villains change costumes, but the frequency, the underlying frequency of absolute terror is completely identical.
We should probably define those terms for context for anyone listening who isn't familiar.
Good idea. Agenda 2030 originated as a set of United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, but within certain alternative media ecosystems, it has been heavily reframed as a clandestine elite blueprint for a totalitarian global government.
Okay, and the currency collapse.
Similarly, the fear of fiat currency collapse is the persistent narrative that government-issued money is on the verge of apocalyptic hyperinflation.
Right.
By constantly bombarding the brain with these massive hypothetical enemies and looming catastrophes, the media forces the body into a perpetual state of artificial scarcity.
You are chronically in fight or flight mode over events that haven't actually occurred.
And Sine uses a phrase to describe this process that is just haunting. She calls it black magic.
Wow.
And she doesn't mean it in a supernatural Harry Potter way. She means it practically and neurologically.
Right. By consuming this fear porn daily, you are energetically and chemically creating a reality of trauma in your own mind and body before anything bad has actually happened in the physical world.
Yes, you are living the nightmare, experiencing the stress and the stomach ulcers before the monster even arrives.
She provides two highly tangible personal examples of how this black magic infected her own decision-making. The first involves the 15-minute city paradox.
Oh, this is such a perfect illustration of the delusion fear porn creates. So, in alternative media circles, there is massive fear-mongering about the concept of the 15-minute city.
What is that originally?
It is originally an urban planning concept aimed at making neighborhoods more walkable, ensuring you have groceries, schools, and parks within a short distance.
That was nice, honestly.
Right. But the fear narrative twists this into a dystopian plot, claiming these zones will become open-air prisons where the elite lock you in and restrict your travel.
Okay.
So Sonal was deeply immersed in reporting on these terrifying warnings. Meanwhile, in her personal life, she was traveling frequently to Dubai.
And she absolutely loved her living situation in Dubai. She recounts how she would go downstairs from her apartment and her gym was right there in the building.
A 2-minute walk took her to a massive supermarket.
3 minutes away were excellent restaurants. Her child's school was a 5-minute walk down the street. She never needed to sit in traffic. Everything she needed to live a vibrant, highly convenient, stress-free life was within a tiny radius.
And then the cognitive dissonance shatters, and it hits her. Wait a minute. I am currently living in a 15-minute city.
The exact urban layout that she was terrified of on her podcast was the very thing bringing her peace and convenience in her actual physical reality.
She realized she was letting hypothetical future fears, the paranoid idea that maybe someday a shadowy cabal will lock the gates, completely ruin her ability to enjoy a currently pleasant reality.
That is wild. The second example demonstrates how fear porn dictates financial behavior. Because she was consuming a daily diet of financial doomcasting podcasts and articles, constantly predicting the imminent catastrophic collapse of the US dollar, she went into a state of severe panic regarding her own business.
Right, she almost entirely dismantled her new company's payment infrastructure to force all transactions onto Bitcoin.
Her business partner had to physically pull her back to reality and intervene. He had to say, look, the dollar hasn't collapsed yet. If it does someday, we will adapt. But right now, today, our customers want to pay with credit cards.
Don't destroy our functional business today because you are paralyzed by a hypothetical tomorrow.
It perfectly illustrates a foundational law of psychology. Input dictates behavior. When you consume a diet of fear, you act out of panic.
You make irrational, highly defensive decisions that often inflict far more damage on your life than the phantom threat ever could have.
It's like deciding to protect yourself by building a massive reinforced concrete bunker right in the middle of your living room.
Okay, I can picture that.
You drag the concrete in, you wall yourself off, you sit inside the dark cube, and you think, I am perfectly safe from the outside world.
But in reality,
You've blocked out all the sunlight, you can't interact with your family, and you are slowly suffocating on the dust of your own defenses. You are actively creating the exact suffering and isolation you were trying to avoid.
the bunker analogy highlights the self-inflicted nature of the isolation so well, but it inevitably raises the primary counter-argument that listeners will have. If the bunker is suffocating, do we just tear it down and walk outside completely exposed? If we stop watching the mainstream news, if we stop consuming alternative media warnings, don't we just become willfully ignorant?
Ah, right.
How do we remain informed, responsible citizens without letting the fear porn hijack our nervous systems?
That is the million-dollar question. Because ignorance isn't bliss. Ignorance is just vulnerability. But the source material doesn't just leave us drowning in the despair of media manipulation.
Thankfully.
It actually drives toward a highly tangible, empowering solution. Philip and Senai guide us toward a concept they call the mild middle.
The mild middle. And it's important to note, this is not about apathy or centrism. It is a state of highly conscious consumption.
Right.
It is the realization that to survive the modern information age, to actually maintain your sanity and your agency, you have to fiercely guard your sensory input. You must become the ruthless gatekeeper of your own mind.
They discuss this in relation to the Wakker community. In Dutch, this translates to the awake or truth seeker community, a demographic that swelled heavily during the pandemic.
And the profound tragic irony they observe is that many people within this community who pride themselves on seeing through the illusions of the mainstream matrix are actually just as trapped in a low-frequency, panic-driven state as the mainstream viewers they constantly criticize.
They essentially traded one matrix of fear for another.
Exactly. And the universal law of human psychology remains undefeated. Output relies entirely on input.
Yep.
If your daily cognitive diet consists of polarization, doom scrolling, conspiracy, and perpetual outrage, your output, your mood, the way you treat your spouse, your baseline worldview will be characterized by hostility, anxiety, and deep suspicion.
It makes genuine human connection impossible because everyone outside your specific echo chamber looks like either a potential enemy or a brainwashed sheep.
So to break this destructive cycle, you have to radically redirect your energy. You have to consciously stop fighting massive, hypothetical global agendas that you have absolutely zero control over.
And redirect that exact same energy toward local creation, personal peace, actual physical face-to-face human connection.
Philip shares a beautiful, illustrative parable about this paradigm shift. It is the tale of two men facing a societal blackout, a massive failure of the power grid.
I loved this story because it makes the abstract so practical. Okay, so we have the first man. Let's call him Willem, as they do in the source.
Okay, Willem.
Willem is deeply entrenched in the fear porn ecosystem. He has been prepping for years. He has 3 heavy-duty emergency survival kits stockpiled in his basement.
He's ready.
He has water filtration, tactical gear, the works. He is intellectually and materially prepared for the apocalypse. But when the grid actually goes down, Willem happens to be commuting. He gets stuck on a train miles away from his fortress and his survival kits. And because his entire worldview is based on fear and isolation, he is paralyzed, terrified, and completely alone with his panic.
Now contrast Willem with the second man. This man hasn't spent the last 5 years doom scrolling. He spent his time relaxing on a park bench, playing with his dog, saying hello to the barista, and actually getting to know the people in his neighborhood.
He cultivated a state of calm being and local connection.
Right. When the power goes out, he happens to be sitting in his apartment. He doesn't have 3 tactical survival kits, but his nervous system doesn't panic.
What does he do?
He simply walks out into his apartment hallway, knocks on his neighbor's door, and says, "Hey, the power is out. I have some candles. Do you happen to have any extra bottled water? Let's pool our resources and wait this out together."
The man who focused on connection survives the crisis through community.
And the man who focused entirely on fear is isolated and helpless despite all his material preparations.
It perfectly encapsulates the thesis of their entire conversation. Genuine human connection, not paranoid isolation, is true survival.
It echoes Sine's point regarding gender and culture earlier, too. When the actual crisis arrives, we are going to need each other.
Men need women, women need men. Different cultures possess different problem-solving skills that we all need.
But if we spend our days consuming media algorithms designed to make us hate and fear each other, when the crisis comes, the psychological divide will be too wide to cross. We won't be able to reach out and ask for that cup of water.
So what does this all mean for us right now, today? Both Philip and Sine have taken this philosophy and turned it into tangible action in their own lives.
Philip runs his Bewusstbondgenoten, or Conscious Allies community, which focuses heavily on local personal growth and physical connection rather than just online political awakening.
And Sine is developing educational courses on how to recognize these manipulative media frequencies and transform that biological fear into creative power.
It's very practical.
It makes me wonder, is the ultimate act of rebellion today not protesting in the streets, but simply choosing to be joyful and connected in a world that profits immensely from your panic?
That might genuinely be the most radical, subversive thing a human being can do in the 21st century. Refusing to let your nervous system be monetized by algorithms.
Choosing the mild middle of connection over the highly lucrative extremes of polarization.
Okay, let's take a breath and look at the massive expanse of ground we've covered today.
We've covered a lot. We started sitting in a restaurant in Marrakech looking at the mirror of migration and realizing that clinging so tightly to our cultural labels is often just a biological fear of the unknown.
We followed Sine as she took the terrifying existential leap off the outdated GPS of borrowed beliefs to find her own inner somatic truth.
We waded through the incredibly complex, evolving dance of modern men and women, trying to figure out how to be mutually independent without losing our vital connection.
We exposed the dark magic and the neuroscience of fear porn and how media algorithms trap us in hypothetical bunkers.
And finally, we ended up on that quiet park bench, realizing that conscious local connection is our absolute best defense against a polarized world.
We have mapped out an immense amount of sociological and philosophical terrain here. But theoretical knowledge is only valuable when it is applied to your actual life.
Right.
So I want to turn this directly to you, the listener. Think about your own media diet over the last 48 hours. What emotional frequencies are you allowing to program your nervous system?
And think about the labels you cling to, your political party, your job title, your social role. Are those labels acting as a compass helping you navigate, or have they become a bucket trapping you and keeping you stagnant?
Which brings us right back to where we started. We talked about how the world we see, the anxieties we feel, might just be a script written by someone else's fear.
So I want to leave you with a final provocative thought experiment to mull over today. Imagine, just for a moment, that you committed to an experiment.
Okay.
If you were to completely fast from all news, all podcasts, and all social media algorithms for just 1 month.
A total blackout.
And if, in that exact same month, you were entirely stripped of every single label you use to define yourself to strangers.
No job title to hide behind.
Yeah.
No political affiliation to signal your tribe. No cultural bucket to claim.
If all of that noise was silenced, who would be the person left standing in your living room?
That's a huge question.
And more importantly, without the fear porn whispering in your ear, telling you what you're supposed to be angry about today, what would that person choose to create?
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. Until next time.